Hi everyone, this is Britton Latulip here. If you guys are just joining this group, you guys are so welcome. So glad to have you here. It's actually growing pretty fast. Not sure where everybody is coming from, but thank you guys so much. We're going to be talking tonight specifically about art in education, not studying art, like what classes your kids should be taking about art. We're going to be talking about the use of art in education. But first, I wanted to answer a few of the questions from last week. One person had commented, they said, okay, if I only have one child, remember last week we talked about, no, it was this week, it was on Wednesday. I'm struggling today, guys. I'm sorry. It was on Wednesday. We talked about leadership as a form of motivation. And somebody said, well, how do you give your children leadership opportunities if we only have one kid? There's going to be less, obviously, but they can take charge of their own education in certain ways. You could set out a bunch of books. They can start picking it through their curriculum. When you go to curriculum sales or homeschool conventions, you could bring them. Let them start looking through the books and picking out their own education, setting their own goals, just giving them some autonomy so that school isn't something we're just doing to them. It's something that they're participating in. They realize they're working towards their own goals. This isn't just a requirement you have for them checking the block. Like, this is setting them up for their future, and they need to be part of it. So just giving them some autonomy as far as in the house goes. They could have a day or two a week where they run things. You could even give them a little bit of authority over you. You got to be careful, but they could pick out some meals, just organizing, any form of leadership. I would just be creative. The second thing people ask is, how do you implement this? This is obviously dangerous, giving your children the ability to run the house. It can be a little bit scary. Some kids are you're going to be afraid that they're going to misbehave or mistreat or bully their younger siblings. We haven't really experienced that a ton, is a little bit. There's actually less fighting when there is that kind of hierarchy and people are in charge than when they aren't, or me and my wife are in charge and we're not around. They'll fight a whole bunch. But if we appoint one of them in charge, then there's an order. Somebody's in charge, somebody has responsibility. They actually get along better. But you have to monitor that. I wouldn't necessarily give them a whole day right away. Maybe give them a few hours and kind of ease them into it. Everything you do, you can kind of ease them into it. We talked about removing some of the distractions last week. I don't want to go totally into that again, but you can do this in phases. It was really funny. We actually did it in a phase. We said, look, there's literally not enough room anymore for your toys in here, so we're just going to remove some. And at first we did it, and then after a while, it was really funny. My two oldest daughters, they just packed up a ton of their toys, and we're like, a few weeks later, we're like, we need to get rid of these too. There's just not room. And they started purging their own lives and kind of organizing their own lives. So that was great. So you'll have to implement it in phases. I don't want to get into it too much tonight because I really do want to talk about art tonight, but just wanted to address those things. So tonight we're talking about art. I posted a picture of an illustration I did it's been a little while ago, but it's for a new book I'm working on for heroes of the dragon, and you can click on it, get a little bit bigger picture. That's St. George fighting the dragon. It's pretty exciting. I illustrated that. I think art is really important in education, and I don't mean kids learning how to draw or studying art. I mean art is book covers and illustrations and books, just to kind of draw kids in. Art is really important, but I also think it's misused a lot, and so I want to address that tonight. I want you to understand Blue Manor's approach to including and excluding art. We actually intentionally exclude art a lot of times. We're very careful. Art is super powerful. We don't want to overuse it, and we don't want to spoil other forms of art. So I'm going to get into that. All right, the importance of art. Art is a form of motivation. It should inspire kids. It should be aiding the learning process. A lot of art out there is not good for kids. It actually distracts from the learning process. There's a lot of kids shows out there which are entertaining, and that's all that they are. But as your kids watch them, your kids are inspired to act bad or be sassy and rude. We noticed our kids were watching a few cartoons. This is a long time ago, but they started sassing and repeating things from that. Man, that is bad art. We want to exclude that. At Blue Manor, we want positive art. If you look at St. George and the Dragon on Facebook, hopefully you guys are seeing that. I illustrated that. I'm proud of it. I love that illustration. I love illustrating dragons, so I wanted to share that with you. That book is coming. But we want art like that it's inspiring. So much of the art that's geared towards kids these days is kind of superheroes, kind of action figures. They fight crime, and I guess they're the good guys, and it's entertaining, but it's not necessarily something that can inspire your kids in a meaningful way. Like, your kids aren't superheroes. But St. George, even though this picture is a little bit dramatic, St. George is a real person. He was a Roman soldier. He was a Christian. He ended up being tortured to death for his faith during the Diocletian persecution. That's a hero I want my kids to have. That's a real hero. I did Pocahontas last night. Disney took a Pocahontas movie and absolutely, they lied. I mean, it's not historical at all. It's a horrible movie, even though it's entertaining. It's not historical. They had their own agenda behind it. But actually, the Pocahontas story is really cool. Pocahontas became a Christian. She saved John Smith, and she was actually a really young girl. She wasn't a grown woman like in the Disney's Pocahontas movie. She was a young girl. It's such an inspiring story. They think she was 10 to 12 years old, and she had the character to step in front of her own people, even challenging her own father to save somebody's life. So that's the kind of art we want there. Okay. One other thing I wanted to talk about was when not to use art. I had somebody sign up for Blue Manor Academy a long time ago. She got on and she's like, I thought there was going to be more to it. You're an illustrator. I thought there'd be more pictures and all this stuff. And so she unsubscribed. And I think that was really unfortunate. There's tons there. There's more than you need. There are the classics, some of the greatest books ever written. Your kids shouldn't need illustrations with everything. On some of those books, it's actually the reading that's important. We don't want them to have the illustrations. I have a cover illustration to kind of draw them into the book. I don't even like that. Some of these books are written for your imagination. And if every picture is illustrated, you're actually ruining the story. Your kid, if you read, what's a good one? If you read Peter Pan and the kid just reads it and listens to it and imagines, he's going to come up with this whole world in his own head. It's going to be amazing. But after you watch the movie, you'll never see Peter Pan different than what you've already seen it. Or Beauty and the Beast, for example. I actually let my kids watch that movie. I love that movie. It's very well done. It's actually better than the classic story. That's why we did it. But you'll never see Belle in any other way than she was in Disney. You're never going to see the Beast in any other way than what you remember him in the movie. So they did the creating for you, and it kind of ruins your kid's imagination. And the problem we have is we try to take tough books like the classics and we give kids a crutch with pictures so that your kid can actually just flip through the book. They don't have to read it anymore. They don't have to use their imagination. They can look at all the pictures, and generally they're plot posts. So you take the most significant elements of the story, and that's what illustrators illustrate. That's usually, I know, I'm an illustrator, that's what we do. So you take those pivotal climax of the story and you illustrate it, where your kid can literally just flip through, look at all the pictures, and get a gist of the story. There might be a dramatic chapter where you don't know if somebody died, for example. Well, if your kids already flipped through the pictures, they know they didn't die. So it takes away that suspense because they've already seen the pictures. They know that that character makes it to the end. Anyway, you see what I'm saying? It can actually ruin it. It definitely ruins the imagination. A lot of times if you've read a book without pictures, like some of the classics, and then you watch the movie, it's very disappointing. You're like, no, that's not how that character looks or acts or talks, because that's that actor's interpretation or the director's interpretation. But you had this image in your imagination. And so some of our books on Blue Manor Academy, they aren't full of pictures. They're classics. We just want kids to read it. We want kids to imagine the story for themselves. So we're specifically excluding art from that because we want, the words are art. We want kids to read it and enjoy it that way. So that's something to think about with art. Another thing that we thought was really funny is we came up with a phonics book, 5-minute phonics. This is a great book to teach kids how to read. And we got a lot of feedback. Kids aren't as excited maybe to get into it in the beginning because we put educating kids first. And what a lot of publishers do is education isn't the focus. It's marketing, it's selling. And they know that if they have a phonics book with tons of cool pictures and stuff like that, kids will want it, and their parents will buy it for them, and their parents will think, oh, this is great. The kids are learning how to read. They're really interested. But actually, it's the pictures that the kids are drawn to, and it's actually detracting from the learning. If you have a phonics book and you're trying to teach your kid how to sound out words, and you have the word fox, and then you have a picture of a fox right next to it, your kid isn't reading. Your kid's looking at the pictures. And if you have a picture book and they're learning how to read, you'll notice a lot of times they'll read really fast and they'll get the words wrong. They'll say, the fox is running, but maybe it's jumping. But they looked at the picture and they'll say, oh, the fox is running. That must be what it is. They're guessing based on the picture. So actually the picture can detract from education. So we always try to put learning first. And we said, okay, we might sell less copies of our phonics system, but we want it to be effective. So our phonics book has absolutely no pictures. It's meant for you to sit down beside your kid and read and sound out the words and teach them how to actually read. So we excluded art in that case. Yeah, there's a huge difference between entertaining and inspiring. So we try to use art, we try to limit our art to be inspiring. I actually think that's a big deal. There is a time to sit down for a movie, maybe once a week, and just be entertained. But the art we want to use in education should draw them in. It should be inspiring. I remember my grandma, she had a picture. It's a famous painting. I think it's called The Suspense, and it's a girl praying, and all the animals are waiting for her to dig into her meal. I think they expect to get a little bit of it, but she's taking time to pray first. She's leaving you in suspense. I remember that as a kid, and I remember that now. It impacted my life. It made me value and be inspired to pray more before meals. So that was really positive artwork. So I just want you to know that when you go to Blue Manor Academy, you think, oh man, some of these other sites, they have all these illustrated classics and they have all these pictures and our kids just love to sit there and look at it. I've watched my kids on those sites and a lot of times they're not even listening to the story. They're just flipping through the pictures, which is defeating the purpose. So please, with Blue Manor Academy, you go there, understand we have designed this to be education first. I don't want your kids to look at the pictures on some of these books. I want them to actually read it, imagine it, use their imagination to kind of paint the picture for them. That's powerful and it's important, and it'll actually impact their lives more, and we can get into that later. I'm going to say just one more time with the classics, I really hate when the classics are totally illustrated, because that book is a classic not based on its illustrations, but based on the words, based on the story. When you want the reader, your kids, to not know what's going to happen in the next chapter until they read it. You want them to use their imagination to paint themselves into that story. And when somebody else comes along and illustrates it, especially that's their creative juice. That's their image of what Belle looked like or the Beast looked like. You're ruining the story for your kid. I hate that. I would highly recommend reading the classics. It's funny. Everybody illustrates the classics because it sells more again, because that's what the kids want. So if you go to the bookstore and you've got three or four books, let's say, of Great Expectations, and one is just beautifully illustrated for kids, that's the book the kids are going to want. That's not necessarily the book they should be reading. But the manufacturers don't care about like what's best for kids. It's what the kids want. That's why they make sugary cereal. It's not necessarily best for the kids, but they know they can sell it to the kids. So we are going to limit ourselves at Blue Manor Academy, always put education first. Hope I'm not rambling too much. I think I beat that point enough. The second thing I want to talk about with art is the importance of distinguishing between boy and girl art and understanding what inspires. There's actually this site, we were looking at it last night, me and my daughter, she wants to be a painter, and I have a little boy who wants to be an illustrator. There's these two artists, they're a husband-wife couple, they're amazing, at least their artwork is just amazing. One is named Annie, one is named Justin. I look at Justin's artwork, I'm like, man, that is so good, I would love that. I wish I'd seen that as a kid. He's famous. He's done some of the Lord of the Rings series. Just amazing. Draws dragons and battle scenes and stuff. Pretty cool. Draws all these weird creature monsters. When my little boy Jonathan saw that, he's like, whoa, like he loved it. He was drawing all of them, super inspired. Just loved it. And then my daughter was like, oh, it's okay. I mean, this is one of the best artists in the world. My daughter's like, it's okay. I like Annie's stuff. And I'm looking at Annie's and I'm like, dude, it's so boring. It's this beautiful girl holding this fish and a lamb. And it's absolutely beautiful. Don't get me wrong, but to me, it's kind of boring. But it's not right or wrong. It's like they're attracted to different things. If you look at girls, there's always kind of been this debate about girls and art and their style and trying to get girls into doing more action and animation. But girls love to paint beautiful pictures. My daughter basically paints all day. She paints girl mermaids. She paints girls standing there looking beautiful, girl faces. She's totally into beautiful things. She likes to paint peacocks and flowers. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And, you know, my other boy, he's always doing monsters. That's all he does. Monsters, crazy monsters, battle scenes. He's a boy. And the problem with education is a lot of times they don't distinguish. And most publishers understand that it's women that are buying curriculum, homeschool curriculum. They understand that most of the teachers in America are women. So most of the art is geared towards women, moms purchasing it, not necessarily towards the kids. And so what happens is you have these adorable, cute Bible books, and you have beautiful illustrations. It's very aesthetic. It's very beautiful, and the girls love it, and the boys are like, it's okay. I actually think it's something to think about, to consider. And so what's happening to boys is they get drawn into the comic books and kind of go that route, and it's a lower quality of learning. And it's sad too, because as time goes on, the boys get drawn into the comic book world. Tons of boys that are in art are just obsessed with the comic book world. and it becomes darker and darker and darker. And some of the heroes in that world, it's really bad. I mean, it's kind of womanizing. They're very violent. A lot of times they are bad, degenerate people, even the heroes. But they fight the bad guys, so it's okay. That's a real problem. The other thing is there's so many illustrated, artwork that's geared towards preschoolers and young kids. But as kids get older, there's not a whole lot of Christian stuff. That's a real problem. We have like Veggie Tales for babies and interesting, cool stuff. There's Theo. I don't know if Theo. It's amazing for younger kids. There's not a whole lot of cool, exciting artwork for elementary and especially for teenage people with Christian values. If you look at the art world, the people who are producing the movies and the comic books and the teen books, a lot of it's very degenerate. It's not things that we'd want our kids reading. That's why, like my dragon picture, I want to kind of attract a boy who's 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe even 11, 12, kind of draw him into this world too, make it exciting, draw him in with the art, but then have some substance behind it. St. George is an amazing, real person, way better than Batman or Spider-Man or any of that stuff. So just something to think about. Art, we try to do both. If you look at some of my Bible books, it's funny. I illustrated a Bible book. That's Jonah. But anyway, in this book, there's a lot of cool illustrations. And one of my daughter's favorite illustrations is Ruth. And I'm like, oh, geez, Ruth is just standing there. She looks beautiful. She's got her hand kind of running through a field of wheat. And that's my daughter's favorite illustration. And then, of course, my sons, they love David and Goliath and those action scenes. And so I try to include both of that. I try to include stuff that's going to draw girls in, try to include stuff that's going to draw boys in and be exciting in our illustration. And that's kind of our philosophy at Blue Manor Academy. We understand that education shouldn't be genderless. The socialists, the communists have really pushed that in our country. If you look at a lot of the elite prep schools, they still are not co-ed. I went to an all-male military boarding school. Totally different philosophy, totally different attitude and mentality. We had almost all male instructors. I think it was actually really good for us. And then of course they have female prep schools, all girl prep schools, and they kind of take a different mentality because boys and girls learn a little different. And that's just something to consider because you're probably, as a mom, you're probably the primary educator and you're going to have your own biases. I would love if more men could get involved in education, especially in picking out the material, being like, oh, I love that one. Look how exciting that is. I bet my boy will like that. They may have a little bit different mentality. When it comes to art, even when it comes to picking out books, Call of the Wild is like the greatest boy book. Every boy should read that. I'd say at like 12 to 13, every boy. But your girls may not be as into it. They like the Jane Austen books. There's stuff for them that the boys might not be as interested in. That's why I hate when they assign one book that everybody has to read, boy or girls. Going through school, I felt like it was always kind of girly books, like the Scarlet Letter or something. So, although I enjoyed that book, believe it or not. Well, I guess that's it. I wanted to just kind of like introduce this topic of art with you tonight and the importance of it. Some of these illustrations, I hope you like them. I hope they are inspiring that I'm doing. When I'm not writing the Art of Raising Children for Greatness series and coding and loading books, when I just need some downtime, I'll try to illustrate some of these books. I don't pump these books out because I have so many other things I'm doing, but I do think they're important, and I'm trying to do them so that they work in a book. Hopefully you guys can see that on the site there, that George fighting the dragon, but I'm trying to do it so they work in a book, but they could also be like a standalone print for your kids for their room, because I think art is inspiring and it's not all in the books. Education is more than just the academics, the books. It's your whole worldview. It should be the artwork that hangs on your wall. I don't want kids or my kids to have Batman and Superman and Spider-Man on the wall. I want them to have the saints. Those are Christian heroes, people who went above and beyond, who sacrificed their life, champions for Christ. That's what I want my kids to be passionate about. But we don't really have any artwork. Most of it's really grown up, or it's from a long time ago, or it's like the Veggie Tale stuff. I want kids to have some classic, amazing artwork that's kind of not cartoony, but just kind of like suits their style for the age, that they can put on the wall, that can inspire them. And that's kind of a philosophy of art and education. All right, guys, I know I'm rambling a lot. Hopefully that helps. This wasn't as prepared as the last class. It wasn't as organized, but hopefully we just have these talks. If you guys have any questions, leave them. I'll answer them. But I wanted you to understand when you go to Blue Manor Academy why we don't have every book is illustrated. We actually see that as a feature. We see it as a benefit to you. that all of those aren't illustrated. We won't want to ruin those classics. I want your kids to read it, imagine it, and just enjoy it. I want them to read and can't wait to get to the next chapter. They're excited about the story. They're imagining it. I just hate that when kids flip to the back of the book and they know, oh, I know how it all ends. The prince becomes, transforms and back out of a beast into a man, and they get married. And you already know that because you looked at the picture at the end. So much better if you just read the story. So, all right, guys, thank you so much. If you guys have any questions, list them below, and I'll try to get back to them. I'm going to be back on Wednesday and Friday consistently. I'll try to do something a little bit more in depth on Wednesday, and then I'll just kind of ramble and talk on Friday and answer more of your questions. All right, guys, thanks so much. Talk to you later.